Next up, we are going to hear from Dale Correa on Towards Reparative Collecting and Digitization, a community symposium and training program. Dale?
Thank you so much, Ralph. Let me share my slides. There we go. Great. Well, thank you all so much. Good afternoon. And I'm honored to join you all for the Global Digital Humanities Symposium this year. I'd like to thank the organizers for all their efforts on the program, the conference website, and all the activities. And I'm looking forward to attending the remainder of today's panels. I'm particularly grateful to my fellow panelists for their presentations. I enjoyed the first one, and I'm looking forward to the next one as well. So in summer 2023, I created a community symposium program centered on developing reparative collecting and digitization practices. The symposium program aimed to create a cohort of University of Texas at Austin graduate students engaged in thoughtful and critical reflections on collection development and digitization, as well as reparative work within both of these former spheres. The goals of the symposium included reading about, discussing, and creating approaches for reparative theory of collection development in a digitizable environment. The latter can be described with the question, what does it mean to create or select print and electronic content in an environment in which digitization is possible and of high quality, in which there is support for the applications of machine-readable text, and in which materials have been removed from their place of origin through legitimate or illegitimate means? What gets digitized and how it gets digitized are decisions that affect everyone, but most of all, marginalized communities that have been historically disadvantaged from participation in scholarship and the building of library collections, even and especially collections for which they are the subject. Such silences and outright repression of voices, viewpoints, and material create reverberating injustices that are felt in library patron interactions for years after they are implemented. Cohort participants were encouraged to engage with existing writing, both scholarly and popular, on these topics in thoughtful and critical ways, with the end goal being to create a sense of belonging to the conversation. As part of this symposium, participants were trained in the basics of scanning, OCR, and outputs and applications with a print material selection of their choice, so that they would have insight into the hands-on processes of digitization and how to harness all these technologies for their goals. The culminating event brought together the cohort's theoretical and practical experiences in conversation with a digital cultural heritage scholar and an engaged audience in order to realize new approaches to digitize resources. So what did all of this look like? Well, it started out because I was a Rare Book School-Mellon Fellow for Diversity and Cultural Heritage. Our final deliverable in that program was a community symposium at our home institution. Additionally, and as my fellowship was reaching its final year, the UT libraries were opening a new space in the main Perry-Castañeda Library called the Scholars Lab. I led the planning group for a space within the Scholars Lab that was intended to support digitization and text recognition technologies, and I now co-chaired that working group. It's called the Scantext Studio. Moreover, I was inclined to pursue the topic of reparative digitization practices because of the increasing focus in my duties on digital scholarship in the humanities, as well as my own interest in the ethics of digitization in a library environment. I've included a couple of my publications on this topic here on this slide. So I knew I wanted to do something with digitization ethics, and I'm very interested in graduate student training through the libraries, so this program idea was born. I won't bore you with the internal intricacies of proposing and getting approval to pursue this program. Everyone will have their own processes and challenges at their own institutions for doing this kind of thing. So let's just jump to the fun part, recruiting the graduate student participants. Oops, sorry. So this was the CFP that I sent out as widely as I could at UT. It took a couple rounds of reminders because it was summertime, everyone was off doing their own thing. But in the end, I was able to choose 8 UT graduate students to participate in the program. The students were in MA and PhD programs, and they were studying in the African and African diaspora studies, English, history, and Middle Eastern studies departments, as well as at the UT School of Information. They had a variety of experiences with research in libraries and archives, with digitization, publishing scholarship, all of which they brought to their cohort discussions. However, they were united to realize the goals of this symposium program. At nearly the same time, late June and early July, I reached out to colleagues through the UT libraries to request their expertise as instructors for this training program. Upon self-reflection and with the support of the cohort, I scheduled an additional session with the Community Symposium keynote speaker, Dr. Raha Rafai, which took place over Zoom about a week before the symposium event. So all the instructors selected readings, documentation, or projects for the cohort to review prior to their sessions, creating a foundation for discussion and questions. I gathered the session agendas and materials in a LibGuide for the cohort's reference. I also created a public Zotero library with these materials and invited the cohort members to participate, making folders for them to organize any additional materials that they found useful. Our first session was held at the end of August, shortly after the semester began, and featured a conversation with Rachel Winston, the Black Diaspora Archivist at the Benson Latin American Collection, and Beth Dodd, Curator at the Alexander Architectural Archives, on defining terms for our work in this program through their experience with digitization as archivists at UT. Rachel and Beth presented on the process of selecting and adding items to the archives, including when, how, and why they make decisions around digitization. Their experiences with a variety of collections, from donors or vendors, recent or older, created in the US or around the world, gave them insight to respond to students' questions regarding the ethics of archival collection development and digitization, and stimulated the students' engagement with crucial concepts by providing real and tried examples for them to consider. The program's second session introduced students to the basic principles of handling cultural heritage materials and digitizing them. My colleagues from the UT Library Stewardship Department, Brittany Centeno, our preservation librarian, and Kiana Fichetti, head of digitization, led the students through a review of best practices for handling paper materials such as books, periodicals, and personal archives. The session was held in the new Scantex studio in the Scholars Lab, which functions as a self-service facility for independent research digitization, image processing, and text recognition-based scholarship. Brittany and Kiana brought sample materials so that the students could get a sense of what to do for different preservation situations, such as a book with a broken spine, brittle and flaking paper or leather, bent or misshapen items, and materials that are tightly bound. They also demonstrated how to use a diffuser light setup, which can be particularly useful for items with a difficult to capture sheen, such as different types of photographs, or for mobile applications when traveling for research. In our third session, we met with Alyssa Guzman, head of digital scholarship services, and Ian Goodale, European Studies librarian, for a survey of training with and discussion of tools that the students might use for their research with digitized materials. Alyssa covered how to get started with digital scholarship, including project planning and management, as well as tool selection. She created an excellent LibGuide for the cohort to refer back to as they move forward with their work. Ian reviewed a number of tools that we recommend and regularly use here at the UT libraries for transcription and OCR correction, as well as text analysis, including some tools that he has developed himself. So throughout these sessions and essentially over the course of the fall semester, the cohort participants were digitizing, preparing a project on the basis of a physical item that they had located in the UT library's collections. They presented their projects, successes, challenges, all of it, at the Culminating Community Symposium. We also enjoyed a keynote address by Dr. Raha Rafai, a scholar of Islamic law, as well as ethics and cultural heritage. She and I have a lot in common. I'd like to give you a sense of the students' projects that they presented at the symposium. So this one was about Persian periodicals and OCR challenges using a Google Docs method in Abby Fine Reader. This one was about Venezuelan oil company periodicals, digitizing the images in particular, as well as doing some OCR work. This one was about Guyanese OBA criminal trial documents from the Benson Collection's Black Diaspora Archives. This was mostly digitization for preservation purposes, but also did some OCR for text analysis, demonstrating the movements and religious sentiments of the trial language. This one was about a particular book, The Coffee Planter of Santo Domingo. This was a manual for growing coffee that traveled from the Dominican Republic to Haiti, to Havana, to Brazil, to India, to Sri Lanka. And it was actually found in the stacks of the main library. This particular project was on Abbasid era Islamic paper. The student worked generally on digitization techniques and ethics of manuscript collection development and management, and also a critical reading of digitization versus paper as technologies. This student was interested in Black female bodies in Latino literature in the US and used OCR to fuel sentiment analysis of novels. And last but not least, this project was centered on a Lebanese Brazilian Christian priest's memoir in Arabic with a transliterated title in Brazilian Portuguese, Kitabuka, which is actually, it's an Arabic word, so this is transliteration. And it also included a brief history of Arabs in Latin America. So during the 3 months over which the program sessions took place, I had many informal chats and formal one-on-one meetings with the student participants. I was able to learn a great deal about the students' motivations, interests, concerns, and from my perspective as a liaison librarian, this was essential for understanding how to improve the program as it was in progress, as well as for any potential iteration of the program and related offerings that we might have at the libraries. The students were all at different points in their programs with very different approaches and goals. Those in their dissertation phase tended to be more focused on a set of concise objectives and fast ways of achieving them. Those students just starting out in their programs faced a different challenge, that of having too many ideas or being pulled in too many directions. The students in the iSchool program were less interested in academic research per se, and more in the professionalization of digitization skills for their very near future careers. Each presented its own challenge to me as leader of the program to try to offer guidance or make referrals to those better equipped to offer guidance. However, these were also learning opportunities for me and a chance to gather information on how humanities graduate students are encountering digital scholarship. What I can conclude from these conversations is kind of obvious, but there is no universal approach to digital humanities or digital at all. It may be to the ethical better to eschew digital methods to best honor the creators or subjects of research. So as I continue my work as a liaison librarian, I keep this in mind and continue to situate my instruction and the inclusion of digitization and digital methods in my teaching as some options from among many that researchers may choose for the goals of their respective projects and with a deep consideration of the associated ethical questions. I believe these words on the slide, which are from one of the student participants' anonymized feedback, capture the essence of what I was hoping the students would take away from this program. And gives me hope that we are contributing to the growth of an ethically conscious generation of scholars, librarians, and archivists. So thank you all very much for listening. I look forward to your questions and the coming presentations.